They were not kings. They did not inherit an empire. They did not conquer Europe with armies. They started with money. And somehow, that money reached palaces, churches, artists, popes, and thrones. This is the story of the Medici family. The bankers who learned that you do not need a crown when the people wearing crowns owe you everything. In the 1400s, Florence was not just a city, it was a machine. A beautiful, restless machine made of merchants, churches, workshops, narrow streets, family rivalries, and gold coins. Everywhere, something was being made. Cloth, paintings, deals, marriages, enemies, power. Florence did not look like an empire. It had no giant army marching across the world. It had no emperor sitting above every citizen. But inside its walls, families fought quietly for control. Some used noble names. Some used political offices. Some used fear. The Medici used a bank. At first, they were not the most powerful family in Florence. They were not ancient royalty. They were not untouchable. They were merchants in a city full of merchants. But they understood something that many rulers were slow to learn. A sword can take a city, but money can enter every room. Money can build trust. Money can buy silence. Money can fund wars. Money can support artists. Money can help a pope. Money can rescue a king. And when important people need your money, they also begin to need you. The rise of the Medici began with banking, not the kind of banking we imagine today, with glass towers and screens. This was a world of ledgers, seals, letters, coins, promises, and risk. A banker had to know who could be trusted, who was desperate, who was rising, who was falling, and who might soon become powerful enough to repay a favor. Giovanni de Medici de Medici helped build the family bank into something far more important than a business. It became a network, branches, contacts, clients, information, a quiet web of influence stretching beyond Florence. The Medici Bank did not just hold money. It held relationships, and relationships in Renaissance Italy could be worth more than gold. Then came Cosimo de Medici. Cosimo did not rule Florence like a king. That would have been too obvious. Florence was proud of calling itself a republic. It did not want to look like a kingdom. So Cosimo became powerful in a different way. He stayed behind the curtain. He supported allies. He arranged favors. He lent money. He funded buildings. He helped artists. He made himself useful to the city. And slowly, Florence began to orbit around him. Officially, he was just a citizen. Unofficially, people knew. If you wanted something important done in Florence, you needed to know where Cosimo stood. That was the genius of the Medici. They did not always need the throne. They needed the people near the throne. They needed the bankers, bishops, artists, merchants, politicians, and families who shaped the city from inside. Power was not a crown on a head. Power was a hand on the table, a name in the ledger, a favor remembered at the right moment. But money alone can make people afraid of you. It cannot always make them love you. So the Medici turned wealth into beauty. They paid for churches, they supported architects, they collected books. They surrounded themselves with painters, sculptors, thinkers, poets, and builders. In their hands, art became more than decoration. It became a message. Every dome, every chapel, every sculpture, every painting whispered the same thing. Florence is glorious. Florence is chosen. Florence is the heart of a new age, and the Medici are standing at the center of it. This is why their story is so dangerous and so fascinating. They did not only buy luxury, they bought memory. Most rich families disappear into old account books. The Medici placed their name inside stone, paint, marble, and myth. They helped shape the world we now call the Renaissance. A time when artists studied the human body, architects looked back to Rome, scholars searched for ancient texts, and Florence became one of the brightest cities in Europe. But behind the beauty, there was always tension. Because when one family becomes too powerful, other families start counting the days. Florence was full of rivals, old families, proud families, families who hated watching the Medici rise. To them, the Medici were not saviors of the city. They were bankers pretending to be princes. They were men without crowns, acting like rulers. And resentment grew. The most famous explosion came in 1478. By then, Lorenzo de Medici had become the face of the family. People called him Lorenzo the Magnificent. He was charming, educated, political, artistic, and dangerous in the way powerful men can be dangerous without looking violent. Under Lorenzo, Florence glittered. Artists thrived, poets gathered, philosophers debated, palaces filled with music, painting, and ambition. But outside the Medici circle, enemies were waiting. The Pazzi family was one of them, rich, important, connected, and tired of living in the Medici shadow. The plan was brutal. Not a debate, not an election, not a slow political move, an assassination. And the place they chose made it even more shocking. The cathedral during Mass. In front of God, citizens, priests, and stone walls that had heard centuries of prayer. On April 26, 1478, Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano entered the cathedral. The city gathered around them. The ceremony began. Then the knives came out. Giuliano was attacked violently and killed. Lorenzo was wounded, but he escaped. Imagine Florence in that moment. The sound of panic inside the cathedral, people running, blood on holy stone. A family's future hanging on whether one man could survive. The conspiracy failed. Lorenzo lived. And because Lorenzo lived, the Medici did not fall. They struck back. Florence turned on the conspirators. The Pazzi name was crushed. Enemies were executed or exiled. And the message became clear. The Medici could bleed, but they could not be easily removed. After the Pazzi conspiracy, Lorenzo became even more than a banker's heir. He became a survivor, a symbol, a man who had walked out of a cathedral attack and kept his grip on Florence. But survival has a cost. The Medici Bank weakened over time. Political pressure grew, the family's fortune was not endless, and Florence itself was changing. Still, the Medici name kept rising in strange and powerful ways, because the family had planted itself everywhere. In banks, in marriages, in politics, in art, and eventually even in the church. Members of the Medici family became popes. Think about that. A family that began as bankers in Florence reached the highest seat in the Catholic Church. Their story moved from counting coins to shaping Europe's spiritual and political world. That is what made the Medici different. They did not control history from one throne. They touched many thrones. They moved through systems that were supposed to be separate. Money, religion, art, politics, family of reputation. They understood that real power does not always stand in one place. Sometimes it flows, like a river beneath a city, quiet, hidden. Impossible to stop once it finds the right path. And yet, the Medici were not gods. Their power rose and fell. They were exiled. They returned. They ruled. They lost control. They became dukes. They married into royal houses. They left behind palaces, portraits, churches, scandals, and stories. Like all powerful families, they wanted permanence. But history does not give permanence to anyone. Not kings, not popes, not bankers, not even the people who pay for statues of themselves. What remains is more complicated. Without the Medici, Florence would still have been important. But it would not have been the same Florence. Some artists may have found other patrons. Some buildings may still have risen. Some ideas may still have spread. But the Medici helped create the stage. They gave money to beauty. They gave protection to talent. They turned their family brand into a cultural force. And in doing so, they proved something uncomfortable. History is not only made by warriors. It is not only made by kings. It is not only made on battlefields. Sometimes history is made in quiet rooms, with ink, with contracts, with debts, with favors. With a banker deciding which artist should be supported, which politician should be helped, which family should be weakened. Which alliance should be strengthened? The Medici did not need to wear crowns. They understood something more useful. Crowns need money, churches need money, artists need money, cities need money, and when everyone needs what you control, you do not have to sit on the throne to shape what happens around it. That is the real story of the Medici family. Not just a rich family, not just patrons of art, not just Renaissance legends. They were the family that turned money into influence, influence into culture, culture into memory, and memory into immortality. Today, people walk through Florence and see beauty, domes, chapels, statues, paintings, and palaces. But behind that beauty is a shadow, a family name moving through the centuries. Medici, the bankers without crowns, the rulers without a throne, the people who showed Europe that gold does not have to shine loudly to control the room. Sometimes it only has to sit quietly in the ledger, waiting for kings to come asking,